Washes away many memories, but the life of Bal Gangadhar Tilak remains with us, nourishing the mind and heart of free India. The crowded years of his life are part of our history. Let us recall those tempestuous days and join the Lokmanya where he lived, worked and fought. The boy from Ratnagiri in the Konkan, born in a lower middle-class family, inherited many fine qualities from his learned father, Gangadhar Shastri. Leaving his birthplace, Tilak made his way to Pune, a city with many historic associations. In 1872, he joined the Deccan College. This was to be his home during the most formative years of his life. Soon, his restless mind was absorbed in the study of a wide variety of subjects. Kerunana Chhatre, who taught mathematics, encouraged Tilak's interest in analytical geometry and astronomy. The young student was no bookworm. He exercised his frail body, determined to conquer physical weakness. Here too, with Gopal Ganesh Agarkar, Tilak discussed the problems of the day, became aware of the plight of his people. Many hours the two friends spent together near the Deccan College. Even today, one feels their shadowy presence.
मला तर असं वाटतं की ही जुनाट पुढं तोडून म्हणजे जी भांडणं होतील त्यातच दमछाट व्हायची. बेहतर काय गोपाळ, इंग्रज त्याचीच वाट पाहतो. आम्ही आपसात भांडावं आणि त्याला रान मोकळं मिळावं. पण नैतिक पाया भक्कम झाल्या वाचून समाजाची एक तनफळी निर्माण होणार कशी? मग काय तिथवर थांबायचं नाही गोपाळ. आलं तेवढं 50 वर्षाचं रक्तशोषण पुष्कळ झालं. देशासाठी काहीतरी आपण केलं पाहिजे आणि झाडून केलं पाहिजे.
The years passed. Tilak graduated, and at the age of 23, he became a lawyer. A brilliant legal career awaited him, but he decided to devote himself to the education of his people. He started a school to instill a patriotic spirit among the youth. Among those who joined him were his old friend Agarkar, Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar, and Nam Joshi. Then the Deccan Education Society was founded and the Ferguson College came into being. But before long, Tilak had resigned from the society, fearing that British patronage would destroy the independent spirit of the institutions. Soon after, he turned to his newspapers, the Kesari and the Maratha. Among the many pens that have fought tyranny, Tilak's is famed. The words he wrote roused his people from the apathy of centuries. When he could find the time, his thoughts always turned to research. His interest in astronomy he combined with his study of Sanskrit texts. The result was Orion, an attempt to establish that the Vedas were at least 6,000 years old. The great Makshmullah, a scholar of international repute, paid tribute to Tilak's scholarship. Meanwhile, Kesari had given the call for the mass celebration of festivals to glorify Ganpati, the god of learning, and Shivaji, the symbol of India's will to be free. These festivals became a powerful lever for political awakening. Then came the terrible famine of 1896. Tilak began organizing relief measures to bring food to a starving peasantry. A year later, the bubonic plague struck. Once again, Kesari led the battle for survival. Pune had become a city of the dead and the dying. The epidemic had spread rapidly. A mass exodus was on. To check the contagious disease, the British authorities gave unlimited power to an officer named Rand, whose high-handedness and rough methods caused untold suffering. Tilak, fearless, indomitable, stayed on in Pune and went to the aid of a haunted people. He organized a hospital and called upon government to treat the victims of the plague with sympathy. The epidemic raged. So did the oppression of a merciless bureaucracy, which refused to enlist the cooperation of the public. A city's wrath had now been kindled. On June 22nd, returning from Government House, Rand, the tyrant of Pune, was a marked man. Revenge had been taken. But before dawn, the hunt for the assassin had begun in the city. From his headquarters, Tilak thundered against the power was being challenged by a man who had become the spokesman of a whole people. His voice must therefore be silenced. The trial took place in the Bombay High Court. The great patriot was sentenced for sedition. The scene shifts to Dongri jail. The date, September 14th, 1897. On this day, Tilak, the scholar and patriot, began an 18 months rigorous imprisonment, registered as a common criminal. No indignity, no suffering could break Tilak's spirit. Years ago, he had vowed to sacrifice himself on the altar of his country's freedom. And now, as he wasted away on a diet of bread and water, his health was grievously damaged. At last, the British authorities, fearing that he would die, decided to order his release before the expiry of his sentence. To recoup his health, Tilak, together with his family, retired to Sinhagad, Shivaji's historic fort in the Western Ghats. Life was quiet here. The mountain air restored his lost strength. The sunset reminded him of the midnight sun, of the long days and nights of the Arctic region. He was back to his research. With Orion, he had probed the origin of the ancient Vedas. His studies now convinced him that the Aryans came from the Arctic. For those days, his thesis, The Arctic Home in the Vedas, was a remarkable piece of research. Then, in July 1899, Tilak returned to lead the battle for freedom. Punascha Hari Om, we start again. Momentous years followed. The British mobilized to shatter India's unity. The policy of divide and rule was launched. The partition of Bengal was decreed. The entire country was ablaze with discontent. The leaders of the nation prepared for action. Tilak, the ablest and most trusted of them all, now issued his memorable challenge. "We are not armed," he said, "but we have a political weapon. This is boycott. Boycott this foreign government." Can you do that by your united efforts? If you can, you are free from tomorrow. The response to Tilak's fiery words was immediate. The memorable Paisa Fund helped finance new Swadeshi industries. These struck at the roots of foreign exploitation. Kesari called for nationwide boycotts, for a patriotic spirit in every field of activity, and for a new education. Tilak also led the campaign against social evils. Dadabhai Naoroji was president of the Indian National Congress in 1906, a session which approved Tilak's new program. A year later, however, at the Surat session, a serious split developed within the Congress over the new policy. Tilak fought on. Disunity encouraged the rulers to order countrywide repression. Muzaffarpur in Bengal replied with bombs. Many struggles and sacrifices faced India's millions. The British moved to silence Tilak, the father of Indian unrest. Bombay's High Court was the scene of Tilak's historic trial in 1908. The judge enters the courtroom. The drama has begun. Tilak is in the prisoner's cage. The Advocate General, with great vehemence, describes the crimes of the accused. It is an unequal battle against the organized might of an empire. Tilak does not flinch. He prepares his own defense, speaks for a whole nation. A closely guarded jury begins to deliberate on whether Tilak is guilty. Within an hour and a quarter, the jury emerges. There is silence. Soon the verdict is pronounced. He is guilty. The judge asks the accused if he has anything to say. The atmosphere is electric. Then Tilak's voice is heard, strong and clear. "All I wish to say is that in spite of the verdict of the jury, I maintain that I am innocent. There are higher powers that rule the destiny of things, and it may be the will of Providence that the cause which I represent is to prosper more by my suffering than by my remaining free." The people protested. Giant strikes by workers took place for the first time. Tilak began his sentence. He was to be banished from his land and people, transported to the notorious central jail of Mandalay in far-off Burma. Six years of solitary confinement begin. In summer, Mandalay was a veritable furnace. There was no protection from heat or dust. Even the birds perished. Tilak would mother them and also find the precious water to save the withering plants in the jail compound. A letter, heavily censored, would arrive from home once every 3 months. In these impossible conditions, Tilak resolved to continue his research, particularly in mathematics and astronomy. Back in Pune, tragedy engulfed Tilak's family. His wife Satyabhamabai passed away in 1912. The death came as a cruel blow to Tilak. "One chapter of my life is closed," he wrote, "and I am afraid it won't be long before another will be." During the Lokmanya's absence, political activity in India stagnated. The National Congress was losing its hold over the people. Even its pandals were empty. In Mandalay, Tilak searched for a message that would give new heart to his countrymen. He turned to the Gita for guidance. On the eve of the epic battle of the Mahabharata, Arjun too was confused and demoralized. Did not Lord Krishna tell him, "Follow me and fight"? So must India act, selflessly. This was Tilak's Gita Rahasya. In India, celebrations announced the coronation of a new king emperor, George V. Prisoners in hundreds were pardoned and set free. India's heroic son was not released. But in due course, the sentence ran out and Tilak returned. The whole country was filled with joy. In 1914, the world was at war and India turned to... Here in Gaikwadwada, representatives of all sections would come to discuss future plans. In 1916, at the Lucknow session, Tilak re-entered the Congress. United opposing sections welded national unity. Very soon, his immortal words, "Swaraj is my birthright, and I shall have it," had become the battle cry of the freedom movement. In 1918, Tilak sailed to England to conduct a libel suit. In India, new repression was launched, and Mahatma Gandhi took command of the struggle. The Punjab, which had supplied fighting men to the Allies, felt the brunt of the terror. In April 1919, Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar was the scene of a ghastly slaughter. Tilak returned. Millions were joining the freedom struggle. The Congress held its session in Amritsar under the presidency of Motilal Nehru. Some political reforms had been offered to cushion the revolt. Again, Tilak tried to reconcile different viewpoints. He then founded a new Congress Democratic Party upon principles which today are embodied in the Constitution of Free India. With tireless energy, he toured the country explaining his stand, urging the people to accept what was offered and to continue the fight for full freedom. In July 1920, Tilak arrived in Bombay and went to Sardar Griha, where he always stayed. He was to spend his last days here. died on the 1st of August at the age of 65. The Tilak era of India's history had ended. A million people followed his body. A whole nation was plunged in grief. Mahatma Gandhi spoke the thoughts of India when he wrote, Lokmanya Tilak is no more. It is difficult to believe of him as dead. He was so much a part of the people. A giant among men has fallen. The voice of the lion is hushed. For us, he will go down to the generations yet unborn as a maker of modern India. It is blasphemy to talk of such a man as dead. The permanent essence of him abides with us forever. Let us erect for the only Lokmanya of India an imperishable monument by weaving into our lives his bravery, his simplicity, his wonderful industry, and his love of his country.